Good evening and welcome to another edition of Everybody Hates Cleveland, the podcast. If you're new to the website, website popped open yesterday. Actually, tomorrow for us right now. We're doing this on Sunday night, but we'll be posting this likely late Monday night, early Tuesday morning. So by the time you hear this, our website will be up and running. We're breaking on Sunday night at midnight. www.everybodyhatescleveland.com. It's a brand new website. Of course, if you haven't listened to our other podcast, make sure you listen there to get a little bit of background. Of course, you can check out the website. Click on that About tab that's sitting at the top left corner, and you can find out a little bit about our site and who writes for it. New Cleveland site on the blogosphere, and we'll be potting probably a lot just to kind of get out there over the next couple of weeks. There will be a ton of stuff going on in the world of Cleveland sports, with the Indians heading towards the All-Star break in the halfway point of the season, with the Browns, of course, breaking mini camp as we head into the, believe it or not, 2014-2015 season. And, of course, by the end of this week, we should know who the Cavaliers have drafted or traded for, and we'll be this time next week talking about, I guess, probably whether or not the Cavaliers will be trying to sign he who shall not be named, but we'll be probably naming a lot over the next few podcasts, LeBron James, amongst some other players as well. But today, before we get started, while this will probably be our second podcast on the list, this is the first podcast that we've done in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks. Of course, if you listen to our old podcasts at Cleveland Sports Insiders and Indians Baseball Insider, my old cohort here, Mike Hattery, is joining us, relaxing in the wonders of a hot and humid New York summer. Mike, how are you doing? How does it feel to finally be back podcasting?
Feels great. I missed it so much. It's like something was taken away from me without me knowing it, and then you never know how much you miss something until it's gone.
Well, and for those that don't know, on a daily basis, I would get a one-word pod with a question, one-word text with a question mark, pod. So finally, I've given in, and we kick off this brand new website with, of course, our podcast, and I'm sure the two of us, Mike and I, will probably be the bulk of this, but we have a brand new cast of characters, including some old and familiar faces. Probably will recognize Steve Urbanek, senior editor, as well as John Grimm and a few other people that you've probably seen bebopping around on some of the other Cleveland sites. And you may see some guests here, and we don't really know really where this is going over the next few weeks. But you should see a ton of different content from Cleveland sports, of course, but we're going to be barging into the pop culture as well. And Mike and I, in our quirky TV shows, some of which I hope I never have to listen about, but I'm now going to have to not only talk about, but read about on site. But we're also going to be talking music, we're going to be talking movies, we're going to be talking about pretty much anything that's on our mind. So make sure you check it out, www.everybodyhatescleveland.com. Let us know what you think. If you love us, if you hate us, I don't really care. Just show up and let us know. And of course, we'll be a visible voice on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google+. You can check out our RSS feed, all of that, of course, upper right-hand corner of everybodyhatescleveland.com. So without further ado, Mike, our first podcast is really an easy topic, I think, and probably the most, other than Johnny Football, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit in tomorrow's podcast, but the most talked about, I think, situation in Cleveland over the past couple of weeks is the Cleveland Cavaliers. The coaching hire was made this week, and I actually, while we didn't talk about that prior to the show, we probably should touch on that a little bit before we get into the draft. But of course, the Cavaliers somehow managed to get that number one pick, and I know that you and I, Mike, were very concerned about them winning too many games and falling down into that 8-9 category, and here we are with the number one pick. So we're going to talk today about those picks, who they could take. But first, Mike, I think you and I have been championing David Blatt over the past 2.5 weeks. They hired David Blatt, and we were talking on the phone a couple of days ago, and you made a couple of really good points. What do you think about David Blatt, a guy who's never coached in the NBA, built his career in Europe and Russia, in in Israel, not exactly your normal path to NBA stardom as a coach. He's won 20 different types of championships overseas. The Cavs have, and he, of course, runs, as everyone knows, the Pete Carril Princeton offense. At least that's what we've been hearing. Mike, what are your thoughts on David Blatt? Why is this a good hire, or why is this a bad hire?
I think it's an outstanding hire, and it's important to note the fact that I rarely am overwhelming with positivity, but there are a couple of reasons why. First of all, Lou, the other options to me were entirely uninteresting, except for maybe Calipari. I mean, we don't know what the voices are, but, to me, the constant recycling of mediocre NBA coaches because they're part of the old boys club has become entirely irritating. I think the Byron Scott types, the Mike Brown types, they're talented guys, they belong in the game, perhaps, but I'm tired of recycling them, especially for a team that continues to struggle to get out of the basement, talent-wise, and so you need a new approach. Now, to me, this is a decision that has inherent risk, but the Cavs needed to take that risk at this point, and I think one of the things that gets overshadowed when we talk about ideas like Moneyball and the 2%, when we talk about baseball concepts, is not the market inefficiency that existed in that point. It's the idea that there is a market inefficiency. It's the idea that there is something new that we can find to take advantage of, especially for bad destinations or small market teams. And for me, the Cavaliers kind of are that. James might be in play, but no superstars probably coming here via free agency. It's just not going to happen. It's not a big draw. And so you need a very good coach. And I think Blatt offers that. He's creative. He's an innovator. And something new. There is inherent risk, and there is failure, but it was the right risk.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's the thing. We've talked about a lot about coaches in our podcast over the past few months, and really the past couple of years, Mike, since we've done these podcasts. And we talked about Byron Scott, of course, a year and a half ago. We talked about Mike Brown this year, and while between you, I, and Steve, I think we liked one or both of them to some extent. I guess my question heading into this kind of coaching search was, if you're going to hire a guy like Mark Jackson, if you're going to hire a guy like Tyronn Lue, if you're going to hire a guy like Alvin Gentry or any of these other candidates, how are they different? How do they differ from these other guys? I mean, even these other people that they compare, Jason Kidd hire, Derek Fisher hire, the only thing out of the box about them, the only thing different about them than these other guys that we've mentioned, are that they have never coached before. We're getting a 20-plus year veteran coach who, by all indications, is a whole lot smarter than everybody else that he's been around. You can't really put down the smart factor here. This guy's from Princeton. My guess is he probably doesn't spend the mornings reading the Sunday funnies.
Yeah, I mean, to me, when Steve Kerr wants you on his staff, that's a good indicator to me at the outset. And I think he's offensively been incredibly creative. He's shown an ability to get the most production possible out of the assets he has, winning titles in the EuroLeague and foreign leagues where he didn't have the most talent. And that's what's most impressive. And I don't think he has any issue dealing with any sort of NBA ego problems that other coaches have had issues with, especially with the college to NBA transition. Blatt's experience. So I don't have that concern. Really, he's a bold mind. He's a brilliant guy, and I like the risk.
As Steve sends me a text that says, "Don't call off work to pod tomorrow." That's my dedication to our brand new site. I'll be calling off. Don't listen to Steve. So we let's look at kind of the details here. Who does this benefit on this current roster, Mike? You get Blatt. By all indications, he's going to be looking for these backdoor cuts, a lot of motion off the ball. Of course, you mentioned off the ball movement, and the first two people you don't think of are Dion Waiters and Kyrie Irving. But who could this benefit in this offense? Could this benefit a guy who basically disappeared last year, a guy like Anthony Bennett, who seems to, when he wants to play, seems to have this kind of skill set where he does seem to move well without the ball, except for when he's trying to set picks. Could this benefit a guy like Bennett? Could this benefit a guy like Tristan Thompson, who is a worker? Could this benefit anybody else on the roster? And how will this affect Kyrie Irving if the Cavs choose to sign him long term, or a guy like Dion Waiters?
I think you addressed this most effectively, in the past when we were discussing it. And I think one of the really impressive things about Blatt is that he's a brilliant offensive mind, and not just because he created the system that has developed a way to attack specific types of defenses. That's not his brilliance. His brilliance is an ability to constantly remaster offenses based around the talent that he has. So I think when you ask who does this offense best suit, I think it best suits whatever talent is most effective in this, is whatever the elite talent is. I think it's going to benefit Kyrie. I think it's going to benefit Dion, maybe Bennett. I think ultimately it's certainly going to benefit Kyrie in my mind. I think Mike Brown really had a adverse effect on him offensively. I'm incredibly frustrated with Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, because his lackadaisical attempts on defense are really cause for concern, as well as injury issues. But putting that aside, I think long term, I think this is the best effect on Dion and Kyrie. Ultimately, perhaps Bennett. I think it has a negligible effect on a guy like Thompson, unless they can find a way to just get him so he's in space and can push with the ball. Because Thompson's actually a capable dribbler for his position, very fast, very athletic. I'm sure Blatt will find a way to try and create good lanes for him in the middle and good cuts. So that's possible, but the other person that's really going to be rewarded is either Wiggins or Parker. I think at this point, unless the Cavs trade down, it's very possible, and we'll get to later, Embiid, not the pick. So this sets up Parker or Wiggins to come into a really comfortable system with solid guards who aren't pass-leaning, but occasionally Kyrie gets rid of the ball. So I think it really helps them the most.
Well, and so does he carry? And this could be, I don't know, a loaded question, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm an NBA insider by any stretch of the imagination. But you alluded to this, Mike, about the relationship between a guy like Kyrie Irving, Dion Waiters, and the head coaches of the past 2 years, Mike Brown and Byron Scott. And you'd think that these two would be able to reach these two guys, former player, coach of LeBron James. A guy came out of San Antonio, but for some reason they didn't mesh very well. Why would Blatt be a guy who could mesh with these two point guards who or these two guards that haven't seemed to mesh with anybody else? Why would a 55-year-old white guy who's coached in Europe for 22 years be the guy who meshes with these two petulant guards?
Well, I think at this point you're just hoping somebody can, because I don't, I don't think you can ever predict who's going to get along with Kyrie Irving or who Kyrie Irving's going to play for. I mean, Kyrie Irving hasn't played defense at any point in his life. He's constantly hurt. He clearly takes games off on a consistent basis. I mean, and I'm not talking about he doesn't play. I'm talking about on the court he takes games off. He's very concerned about getting his own. He's not always very concerned about winning. I think Kyrie is tortured by the fact that his national brand is incredibly powerful, and yet he's yet to really prove anything. He's yet to have a season where he wins 40% of his games. So his, elevation as some sort of star is really questionable. I think those all-star appearances, are really disgusting to me. But unfortunately, we exist in a time where one thing matters. If you can put the ball in the hole, and not necessarily even efficiently at times, while Kyrie was incredibly efficient in 2012, 2013, he wasn't last year, then you're a star. So I think getting something out of Kyrie, who doesn't function well in the backcourt with Dion, I don't know if anybody can do it. So I don't have any reason to argue that David Blatt can.
Well, Anthony Parker did say he was the optimum players coach, and you've heard it's 2, 3, 4, 5 different players who've been interviewed talk about this guy's ability to reach his players. So perhaps there's something in this guy that's very Popovich, who he's been compared to actually quite a bit. That's the kind of offense, defense, that's kind of team mentality that he brings to the table. So maybe that's the missing piece. One last tidbit nobody's really talking about with regards to David Blatt that I think is very interesting. He took that Russian team to the bronze medal in the Olympics in 2012. One of his guards on that team, Cleveland's very own Sergei Karasev, and he played actually substantial minutes on that team, 25 minutes to 30 minutes per game. Could this be a boon for a guy that most people are intrigued with because of his size, the positions that he can play? Mike Karasev get a boost, maybe as a guy that understands Blatt more than the others, and maybe he could find some time on this team.
I think if you've heard anything that Blatt said about Karasev, you have to expect that. He's very positive about his ability to shoot and to understand the game and really fit offensive systems. So I think that's a really good setup for Karasev moving forward. And it'll be good to see him get minutes. Hopefully, I've seen rumors of Jarrett Jack out of town, and I can't say that I'm not elated. I think moving him for Marcus Thornton, getting rid of that contract, getting a one-year expiring guy is really a steal. I think they got to do it. And ultimately, if that gets Karasev some more wing minutes with, somebody else sliding in the guard spot, that'd be great. Some more 2 or 3 minutes for Karasev. But, hopefully Blatt knows how to optimize him.
Well, it would certainly be a bonus if he can wake Bennett up, he can wake Karasev up, and of course we'll be adding some pieces to that. And let's talk a little bit about those pieces rather than discuss in this podcast who we want. Although we'll allude to a piece that you wrote today, Mike. Let's talk about the candidates at number 1, and let's get kind of the elephant of the room out of the way, and let's talk Joel Embiid, who ironically enough came to Cleveland, had a phenomenal, by all indications, workout, and likely at that workout broke his foot. Obviously, he's out 4 to 6 months. Obviously, that puts him behind the 8 ball with regards to this draft. But with that said, I think health, if you take health out of the equation, you're looking at probably the most upside player in this entire draft. Talk about Embiid. Let's ignore the foot for a moment. Is somebody, if he can get healthy, is somebody going to get a steal likely beyond the 3rd pick? And might the Cavs still take Embiid, or is the Cleveland history going to force the hand there, and is Embiid going to start to fall far? What do you think?
I just think you can't take Embiid at 1. Ultimately, this is not a separate occurrence. Embiid has had some injury issues. He has some back issues, a few other pieces that are more serious than people expect.
Stress fracture possibly in the back that they haven't really disclosed. And, of course, the foot that we were talking about beforehand, yeah.
I think wear and tear, too. There's been a lot of analytic work done that wear and tear on guys who are 6'8" and taller is usually much greater in terms of the longevity of their careers. There's a lot more wear and tear. Basically, these are really oddly constructed human bodies that don't handle the minutes as well as others, especially the weight and height dimensions that are really just disproportionate to the normal size. So with the foot issue, I don't think, I really don't care if he wasn't going to miss this year, if it wasn't an indicator that I don't think he's going to have a tremendously long career. And I'm worried about his ability to have a significant NBA career. I understand that using one or two injuries is fairly subjective, but that's a tremendous concern, especially at number one. I don't think you can miss it number one with this much risk. So I don't. I think if you're the Cavs, he comes off the board at one. He has to. You got to take him off the board. Um, could they trade down? I'd take him at 6 or 7. If you get another good asset and trade back to there, very, very comfortable with that. You trade back and grab Derek Favors, maybe from the Jazz, with 5, and you take Embiid. Very interesting, even though they're somewhat positional overlap. But ultimately, you can't take him 1.
Yeah, and then of course the flip side of that is, if the Cavs think that of the 3, he's the guy, and if they are not concerned about that, this is where I wonder about being a Cleveland fan, and this is where I wish I was more biased, or I guess unbiased would be the right word here. I would love to look at these 3 guys that we're going to talk about with an unbalanced, unwavering kind of viewpoint, because I've heard some NBA guys over the past week talk about Embiid still being the number 1 guy. I was listening to the BS report as well, and where Bill Simmons and Jalen Rose were talking about, this is still a guy that has the best upside, and Cleveland should still take him at 1. But unfortunately, I can't do that. If we were unbiased, Mike, would Embiid still be an option? Is it because we're talking about Cleveland, the team who drafted Anthony Bennett last year, the team who has had number 1 picks seemingly every year, the team that everybody hates because they're so bad? Is it because we're Cleveland fans that Embiid's off the board? Is that just, or is this legit? I mean, is this isn't, nobody's comparing this guy to Noel other than the injuries.
I think it's legit. I don't. I think if you bottom out this hard and this frequently, and you have 2 other guys who are going to be good NBA starters at their floor, I understand the upside, but I just think you can't. I think continuing to bottom out with the sporadic nature of the NBA, the weakness in the Eastern Conference right now, taking that risk on Embiid is punishing him, and they've won 3 lotteries, and so how many can you win? How guilty does the NBA feel about LeBron James is really the question at this point. And I don't think they feel that guilty anymore. So I think I have to pass on Embiid, and I'm very comfortable taking both Wiggins and Parker. I think Embiid is a tremendous talent, but he's not worth the risk to me.
So before we get into the next 2 guys, this will kind of segue into Wiggins, I suppose. Let's look at the Cavaliers spot at number 1, and the team that's most intriguing to me in this draft, Mike, is the Philadelphia 76ers. They're sitting at 3 in one of the power positions with one of these 3 guys. But unfortunately for them, with Embiid out, it looks as though 1 and 2 will be Parker and Wiggins for sure, meaning that the Sixers will be sitting at 3 with an injured big man. Sound familiar? The Sixers cannot, under any circumstances, much like the Cavaliers, take Joel Embiid. Are the Cavaliers sitting in a very powerful position right now where you have a team who, by all indications, will do whatever it takes to get Wiggins? Do you have a Cavaliers team who could perhaps work the system a bit and maybe get a piece from the Sixers that nobody's talking about right now? And I guess I can leave it up in the air for the people listening to think about who I'm talking about. We talk about power forwards all you want, but I think the Cavaliers would probably be interested in a couple of other guys before any power forward. But could the Cavaliers pull some sort of swing where they get a whole bunch of stuff from Philadelphia, including 3 and 10, that could entice them to move down a couple of spots, perhaps pick up a guard from Philadelphia, and I don't know, maybe take Embiid as your big man down the line, and then you have that 10 pick to supplement?
Yeah, I think Philly's a dream match. I think Philly really just got nailed with the Embiid injury. ultimately. At 3, if you're Philly, Embiid's overlap a little bit with Noel. And the other, of that top tier that we're looking at is probably Exum. And they're pretty happy with Michael Carter-Williams running point. Obviously, Exum could play the 2. A lot of people think that he may be more scoring dominant and he may be a 2 down the line. So that's a possibility if you want to go that way. But he's, a lot of people believe he's still pretty high risk. So I think Philly is an ideal trade partner, and they have the right assets. I know you and I would love to go some really interesting directions here. I personally, I would love to see a really audacious trade where you go Kyrie and the number 1 for 310, Michael Carter-Williams and Nerlens Noel, and then you take Embiid, and holy cow. And then you can trade Noel as an asset, and there's a lot of things you could do. I do think they can get something. I think there are going to be a lot of deals on the table. I think the number 1 pick is worth more today than it was a week and a half ago because of the Embiid injury, because of Wiggins and Parker. And I think the Sixers have to make a move. I think they're in the worst spot possible to draft where they are.
Could you imagine if they take Embiid? I think Philadelphia would just burn to the ground.
I mean,
Noel and Embiid, they could be great down the line, but I just they can't take him. I mean, what are they going to do? Sign Bynum next?
Twin Towers. I mean, really, I think you have to. I think that's the unfortunate thing for Philly. I think if I'm sitting there and Embiid's on the board, I'm like, I got to do this. But I don't want to be on the board for that to happen, ultimately.
So they'd either have to trade up or trade down for sure. But let's talk about their covet. I mean, let's talk about why they covet Wiggins. You wrote a piece today, Mike, which actually I haven't read yet. It actually, by the time you listen to this, I'll have read it. So will most everybody else who's watching this or listening to this podcast. You have had an affinity for Andrew Wiggins from the get-go. You've been selling high to me, trying to get me kind of to twist in the wind for him. As well. Talk about Wiggins. He seems to be everybody's dream pick with really the one downside being two downsides. The two downsides being that he's not really a shooter at this point, and people question his I guess cutthroat mentality on the court. But let's talk about his gifts. What makes this kid, by many people's indications, that he could be the next LeBron or the next big thing?
Well, the first thing is that you and I never talk each other out of anything ever, and that's a really important thing to know.
I still think Trent Richardson's going to tear it up this year. I'm just saying. All right, let's keep going.
That's too bad. But here,
yes, the first podcast, and here comes the Trent Richardson.
I love
Trent.
I'm
sorry, man.
Okay, but Wiggins, I think I talked about this. I'm inherently biased to certain imperfections, and it's because in the NBA I believe that some things can get better. I think you can become a better shooter, and you can become more aggressive. I think, and I don't think the timidity criticism is necessarily particularly well-founded. I think we have a really small sample size to call some guy timid after he's played 30 games in college, and in some of them he's actually been pretty aggressive with the game on the line. We have one game that we're using, the Stanford game, as a case study in timidity for Andrew Wiggins, and that is a really, really small sample to argue about a player's entire makeup. So I find that to be relatively frustrating. He's a tremendous player because he's a freak athlete. He's solid offensively. He's not a great shooter yet, but he's a good shooter. He can get to the hole. He has a good handle. And defensively, he's already got the skills to be an average to above average defender at the NBA with, the upside to be a really plus defender. And I really like that, particularly with the Cavaliers, because I'm so sick of watching Kyrie Irving and Dion Waiters covering guards on the wing. Obviously, Wiggins is a little bigger. He's about 6'8". He's a big guy, but he can cover twos. He can cover ones very effectively. And I like a guy who can shift around if you're facing a hot hand and Kyrie is putting up 25 and he's giving up 30. I like somebody who I can flash over when you're playing Chris Paul, when you're playing someone like that. So to me, I love that Wiggins fit. I think he's an incredible athlete. I think he's an underrated shooter that's getting better. And I think timidity is an unfair criticism.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you look at vertical, you look at skill set, you look at uh, the games that he just took over at Kansas. Before Embiid even entered the equation, most people thought this guy was going to be number one. And of course, as the season progressed and Embiid started having big games himself and started showcasing his skills, that really took a little bit away from Wiggins. Uh, I guess the biggest knock coming from a Cavs fan, Mike, would be uh, he's not the guy to step in on day one uh, and be a 20-point scorer. And I don't know that that's important on a team like this. I think one of the most intriguing things to me about a team like San Antonio is how they put together the pieces of their team. And I guess my question is taking the coach out of the equation, doesn't Wiggins seem to fit what the Cavs need more? You're not looking at a team that's staunch defensively. While they improved defensively to a certain extent last year because of the coaching style, doesn't Wiggins just fit this team better?
I think he does. My concern is, and you need to respond to this because you have a better feel, but my expectation is that Parker is probably a 4. I think probably his best position in the NBA is going to be a 4. I just don't know how he can defend the 3, whether he can. He may be able to, and that's something we have to see. But I think my expectation is he has to defend the 4. So I think Wiggins. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So I think my expectation is that adding a plus defender who I know can defend the 1, 2, and 3 is valuable fit-wise. The second piece is having a guy who isn't necessarily going to be ball dominant when he comes into the league may not be a bad thing. I don't want him to be timid. I don't want him to run away from the ball. But with Dion and Kyrie, who are incredibly high-usage players, I think fit-wise, with his athleticism, with his ability to move without the basketball, I think that's really positive, and I think that's something that can be used. So I think he might be a better fit than Parker right now, especially with Bennett, Thompson fighting for space at the 4. Yes, but I have no sense of certainty, and if Parker can defend the 3 and play the 3, that changes things for me.
Well, and therein lies the problem with Parker. You're looking at a guy who, to be quite honest, Mike Krzyzewski at times had to bench because he was a defensive liability. I mean, let's not mince words. He hit him. People talk about how he played, quote unquote, played center. Really, what Krzyzewski was doing is hiding him at center to maybe hide a little bit of those defensive issues that he had. But what he does bring to the table is interesting in and of itself. The thing about Parker, and you talk about whether he's a 3 or a 4, and I think when we talked on the phone the other day, Mike, I mentioned Glenn Robinson to you. He reminds me a lot of Glenn Robinson. I mean, this is a guy who is going to be playing, if he plays for the Cavaliers, is going to be lining up against 3s, and what he's going to do offensively to some of these 3s that are going to be guarding him is going to be fun to watch because if he can post up, and when he posts up on these guys, he's going to make them look like idiots. He does what we always wanted LeBron to do all the time, and that was when he's got a guy that he cannot muscle, he's going to take him down to the paint, and he's going to make him look bad. He can also spot up, and he can move around the perimeter on offense like nothing I've ever seen. And I think that's probably hyperbole. Let's just put it this way. He can move very well without the ball. He's tenacious. He fits within the offense very well. And what I think is interesting about this is Blatt, of course, came in on Friday. They hired him. Parker was there at the time. And, of course, Parker does seem to fit the types of offenses that he's run in the past. So coach-wise, it would seem that Parker would fit as well. I think the thing about Parker that stands out to me, though, is he could be a 20-point scorer. And I think down the line he could probably get 10 boards, dependent on who's still on the Cavs at the time and who else is playing. But I think the biggest plus to Parker is that he's a leader on the court, and I think the best way to describe him is people are going to like playing with him, and he'll fit in with Kyrie and Dion to a certain extent because he's not a guy who commands the ball, and he's not a guy who has to take the shot. And I think I think that's where he could be a benefit to this club as well. Much in the same way that Wiggins could fit in other ways, I think Parker could fit offensively in that he's not a guy who's going to need to take 40 shots. He'll definitely be more efficient than the guys taking the other shots, though. Now, defensively, that's the problem. I mean, that's why you're hearing the stretch four stuff because, of course, if he has to guard a three, he's going to look foolish. He just doesn't have quick feet. And I don't know that he's got the upside to have quick feet, at least defensively. He's a guy I think he can find space and get rebounds. I just don't know that he can guard a three. So you'd have to Blatt would have to definitely handle him a certain way, offensively and defensively, and perhaps, as Blatt talks about, use his offense maybe to cover up his defense. I think the funny thing about Wiggins and Parker is I think we're focusing a lot on the negatives of both. There's so many positives to both, and I guess I don't see a deficiency in Wiggins in that I don't think we've got like a 3-year project here. The question is I don't even think there's a question. I think whoever they take, they're going to be fine. That's what I think. I guess my question to you, Mike, is not who are they going to take, is are they going to stand pat and just make a pick, or are they going to make a move? Are they going to move down to 5 and pull into favors? Are they going to move down to 3 and maybe take Embiid, or perhaps package a 1 in the future with Miami potentially not being as strong if LeBron moves away. Today we found out that Carmelo Anthony is opting out of his contract with New York. Might this be the first domino in several dominoes that has a bunch of these guys opting out? I mean, might the Cavaliers know something we don't? I mean, is this one of those scenarios where, unlike 4 years ago, the Cavaliers are in a power seat right now? Do you think that there's more play here? Without getting into specifics, obviously we're talking about LeBron James. What do you think? I mean, might the Cavs make picks based upon LeBron James, and is that dumb?
They might. It's dumb, and they might trade. I think them trading out, I think, is a higher likelihood than maybe we would expect in prior drafts. I think there's enough talent at the top of the draft. There's enough on the marketplace for the Cavs that's more valuable than who they could pick, or perhaps equally valuable. But I think this is the right marketplace to make a deal. I think for either a larger collection of assets that allow you to continue to move around and oscillate with everything in the wind free agency wise right now. So I think the odds of them trading out of the pick are 45 to 55%. I think the odds are pretty high. They're not picking at 1. And as for any other conjecture, I really can't offer anything. But I think as I attempt to get some feel for where this draft is going, and where the Cavs are going, I feel like the odds that they trade out of that pick are higher than we might expect.
Well, all I know is it's only in Cleveland could taking the number 1 pick be the boring thing to do. But of course, that's kind of where we're at right now. Well, Mike, it's good to be back. We're going to have to wrap things up here. We don't want to steal away too much thunder from our boy Steve Orbanek, who I think will be joining us tomorrow. Let's kind of wrap things up here. Who do you think the Cavaliers are going to pick if they do take number 1? And give me a percentage likelihood. Who are the Cavs picking?
I want Wiggins, but I think they're going to take Parker. I think it's about 65% they take Parker. And I do want to note a few things. And the first is that I really love this project. I really love what we're doing because no one deceptively or narcissistically portrays themselves as an expert. And that's not to say that there aren't really tremendous writers that we're doing this with. Jim and Steve have both been absolutely phenomenal at IBI, 2 of the best storytellers you have in Cleveland sports. John Grimm is the best analytics guy covering the Cleveland Indians anywhere at all, ever. We have Sam, who is a really good writer. I've read a couple of his pieces. I really enjoy him. Ryan,
he's gonna be pissed. Well. He's gonna be pissed because he wanted in on this. Now that I think about it,
he should be in, and he'll be in a lot because he's a lot of fun. These are really good writers, and guys, I'm really happy to write with, and I love to read them. I like to write with them because I would read them before I'd read anybody else. So I'm really excited about it, and the key to us is that we're never going to sell you a bill of goods that we know more than we should, than we really do, because that's not what it's about. And we're just going to have a lot of fun and hope you enjoy consuming our content.
Yeah, I'm going to go Parker as well. I'm going to go 75%. But to follow up on that, I guess the whole premise of this site, Mike, and you know what's driven me nuts over the years has been, I guess, a culture here in Cleveland. You know, the title "Everybody Hates Cleveland" kind of sums it up for me. We've got a culture in Cleveland in which, and we're part of that. I'm not going to lie to you. We live. 3 days ago, I was preaching how great the Indians were, and today I could flush them down the toilet as far as I'm concerned. But we have this culture in Cleveland that I really want to start changing. And you go into some of these other towns with these teams that win a lot. St. Louis comes to mind right off the top of my head, and they have this knowledge base and this comfort level of their knowledge that to me is second to none. And that's not to put down the fans here in Cleveland. We've got to be better than that. And I guess my point here is not to say that we're better than that. We're not. But what we want to do is provide you kind of a no fear zone where you can come here and read hopefully good writing and come to these podcasts and listen to just 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 guys sitting around talking sports. And that's all we claim to be, and that's all we will ever claim to be. Does that mean that we won't be able to interview players? Does that mean that we won't be able to get John Clayton to come to our small little site? Obviously that's not the case, but we will never proclaim to know more than we don't. And as soon as we get information, we will let you know it, and we won't, I guess my big thing is I just want to be able to tell you guys what I know, what I think I know, and I think Mike is the same way. And first of all, thanks for the compliments, Mike. And you guys, of course, what Steve and I think of your writing, and glad that you stayed at IBI all those years ago. And of course, now you're part of Everybody Hates Cleveland. So as we move forward, if you're a listener right now and you want to be part of this, please leave comments. Let us know what you want. Let us know what we can provide for you, and we will do everything we can to do that in a very non-threatening manner. By that I mean, we want to be your local watering hole. So feel free to stop by, grab a beer out of your fridge. If you're grabbing one out of mine, I don't know if that's a scary thing or not, but and talk some sports with us. I guess that's really where we're at. We want to learn from you, and of course, hopefully give you some information that you can learn as well. So join us hopefully on a daily basis where you can find out about, of course, Browns, Cavs, Indians, and professional wrestling. We got professional wrestling writers. We've got all of us are interested in different forms of music, and of course, I believe we'll probably have some West Wing stuff going up pretty soon. And good Lord, Gossip Girl stuff, and good Lord, I don't even want to throw up some other stuff. But anything that you guys want us to see, we've probably watched, we've probably talked about, and we probably will talk about as well. And look, the HC podcast. I won't be hosting every single one of these. I hope. Hopefully we'll have a podcast on just about everything from movies to, I don't know, food to, and eventually the plan is to have college sports here in Cleveland as well as Ohio State involved as well. So if you are interested, keep on coming. Post comments down below and let us know what you think. And don't be afraid to stop at Facebook, at Twitter, at Google+, at YouTube. All the links are right there. And then, of course, we'll get a SoundCloud link as well. Starting tomorrow night, you'll be able to listen to our content there. And hopefully in the next few days, we'll have our iTunes account up and running as well. So thanks for joining us. And like I said, let us know what you think. Hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Jim Pete, EHC. And, of course, Mike Hattery is at Hatman EHC. So shoot us a tweet, let us know what you think, and even if you think we suck, I'm fine with that. We'll probably cry off air. Yeah, I probably won't.
I will. I usually do.
Don't worry, he'll cry to me, and then he'll send me a text, and then of course the text right after that will be pod. On that note, I'm gonna make one plug. I'm gonna save Mike. Yeah, I think Mike made his plug, but make sure you check out his piece. He's got his first ever trend spotting on EHC going up at some point Well, I guess I should be talking past tense. Went up at some point on Monday. I'm guessing it's going to be our 10 o'clock or 12 o'clock piece. But the big piece, of course, is we've got John Clayton, our very first piece, which will be up at midnight. And we've got it sticky to the top. So check out www.everybodyhatescleveland.com and find out what ESPN's NFL insider John Clayton has to say specifically about the Cleveland Browns. And he dives into, of course, Johnny Football, Johnny Manziel. He talks Mike Pettin. He talks about the wide receivers. We got Hawkins retweet, which twice we got a favorite and a retweet. I don't know that he's going to jump up and down when he sees what John Clayton says about the wide receiving core, of course, without Josh Gordon, if that does happen. And gets into the front seven of the Browns defense and, of course, the offensive line as well, and then talks about the defensive secondary, which looks to improve a whole lot. So make sure, if you haven't done that yet, everybodyhatescleveland.com, check it out. And then we'll get all the other links to all the other stuff up and running. So make sure you root around the site. There's not a whole lot there yet, but of course over the next few weeks you'll see a ton of more stuff as we start accumulating things. So if you know a good writer, shoot us an email. If you are a good writer, shoot us an email. We'll be looking to add on people who we trust, people who we like, and people who we want to have a beer with. So with that said, go Cleveland.